All it takes is one mistake to kill your business, which is something I've had to learn the hard way twice at this point. So in this video, I want to go through 14 of the biggest mistakes and missed opportunities that I've come across in the creator or coaching or sell your skills online info space, and how to fix or avoid them. From conflating products and offers, to mistakenly conversion issues for lead flow issues, to prioritizing perfection over action. These mistakes cover a broad range, but what they have in common is A, how easy they are to make, and B, how detrimental they can be. So by the end of this video, my hope is that you'll be in a better position to solve any problems that you're facing, or even better, to stop them from happening in the first place. In terms of who I am, my name's Danny. I've been a writer and creator for the last 8 years, but 2 years ago, my last business died. I'd built a small portfolio of content sites that were getting 6 figures and generating millions of views, but then there was an algorithm update and a shadow ban that happened in quick succession. And so to cut a very long story short, I decided to pivot. And ever since then, I've been doing a really big deep dive into how to turn your skills into a simple, solo, and robust online business that has content creation at its core, one that gives you your time back and lets you make really good money from anywhere, and basically gives you the freedom to fill your life with whatever you'd rather be doing, which for me is what all of this has always been about. So anyway, my goal right now is to hit 6 figures again, working a few hours a day on average, and I'm sharing what I've learned and continue to learn along the way. If you want to follow along, please like and subscribe. That makes a really big difference to the channel. But all that aside, the mistakes I'm talking about in this video are all ones I've made over the last 2 years, but they're also ones that have come up a lot in the conversations I've had with people in this space, as well as in some of the mastermind groups I've joined, which have been full of really successful creators and coaches. So ultimately, I hope this helps. I really appreciate you being here. And with that said, let's dive into mistake number 1. Conflating products and offers. Products and offers are not the same. So although people often use these terms interchangeably, there's a key difference that if you don't know about, it can slow things down and make your life much harder than it needs to be. Conversely though, once you wrap your head around how they differ, you stand to gain in some really powerful and fundamental ways. Okay, so if product and offers aren't the same, what are they? A product is what people get if they buy. It's the ebook, it's the course, it's the workshop, it's the calls, it's the coaching. Those are all examples of products. Whereas an offer is the way you present those products to the market. So the offer is the wrapper, it's the packaging. In other words, a product is the gift and an offer is the gift wrapping. So the reason this is really valuable to keep in mind is that it basically means you can sell the same stuff in any number of ways, meaning you don't actually have to change anything at a practical level. You can just change the wrapper, you can just change the offer. When you don't take that into consideration, firstly, you'll sell less, because think of the hooks in your content. If your hook is weak, it doesn't matter how good the rest of your video is. People just won't see it because the hook hasn't grabbed them, so they'll just scroll or click away. And similarly with your offers, when you don't have one, or if your offer is missing some key ingredients, which I'm going to get to next, it doesn't matter how good the stuff inside, the products inside actually are. It doesn't matter how much value you're offering, people will just be much less likely to buy because the offer hasn't communicated that value in a way that makes them want it. But secondly, when you don't realize this difference, you can mistake that lack of sales for a lack of value. You kind of misinterpret what's happening. So you assume that you need to go back in and add more stuff. You need to add more calls, you need to add more modules, you need to add more value, full stop. When in fact, the stuff inside could be totally fine, and instead you haven't wrapped up in a way that people can see the value that's already there. And so making sure that you have an offer is step 1. And then from there, you have to make sure that you're wrapping it up properly and that your offer has everything it needs to succeed, which leads us on to mistake number 2, missing the 6 Ps. Not all offers are made equal. So if you're struggling to get sales, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need more leads, that your marketing isn't working, or that nobody wants or is going to buy your stuff. The real underlying issue could be that your offer is missing something that it needs. The best offers have 6 core components, which I call the 6 Ps: promise, path, price or pricing, protection, perks, and push. When your offer has these 6 Ps, it becomes exponentially easier to sell and easier to buy. And then conversely, if you're missing any of them, your chances of the sale drops. If you want to see if and to what extent your offer has these 6 Ps, or if there are any hidden gaps or opportunities, check out the link in the description. It takes you to something called the 10-minute offer unlock, which is a really simple tool I put together that gives you a visual depiction of the strength of your offers, as well as showing you how to improve it if there are any gaps that crop up. It's totally free and only takes a few minutes, so I recommend checking that out, and I hope you get some value from it if you do. Next though, I want to talk about another common mistake that can happen when you fail to appreciate the importance of your offer. Number 3, mistaking a lead conversion issue for a lead flow issue. If you asked 100 people in this space what the biggest obstacle was to growing their business, I reckon 90% of them would say the same thing, which is leads, or a lack of leads. But from what I've seen, many of these people would actually have enough already. Like, they actually don't need more leads. They just need to make better use of the leads they already have. And that's what it means to mistake a lead conversion issue for a lead flow issue. You think there aren't enough leads coming through the door, when really there's just something happening that is impacting conversions. And so essentially you have a leaky bucket, and until you find and plug the holes, everything's going to feel harder and take much longer, make you think you need more water to pour into the top, when really it's all just falling out of the bottom without you realizing. Part of plugging those holes is nailing your offer, but another part of it is just being more proactive, like engaging more online, starting more conversations, reaching out to people. And then you can also do things like making your offer easier for people to buy by selling the transition versus the transformation, as well as turning people into a customer before you turn them into a client. However, obviously some people really do have a lead flow issue. And so if you think that applies to you, I'll put a link on the screen to the video I made on that topic on how to get more leads without needing ads or a big audience. Next though, let's talk about a mistake that can hamstring a client or coaching offer before it's even had a chance to get off the ground. Number 4, starting with your marketing, not your offer. I was speaking to a creator recently who had 70,000 followers. He had an email list with about 3,000 people on it. He had lots of past customers and great case studies and testimonials, and his offer looked solid too. However, he couldn't get a single client. He'd done numerous launches and no one would buy. So what was going on? Unfortunately, this guy had fallen into one of the biggest but most common traps in this space, where instead of working backwards from his offer to create his marketing, he'd worked forwards from his marketing to create his offer. Basically, he built his audience and then tried to find something that people would buy, instead of finding something that people buy and then building his audience around that. So most of his content was on a particular topic. And so he built his following and his email list and even his customer base off the same thing. But then he was trying to sell a coaching offer on something totally different. And so the result was that it was really incongruent with the audience he'd built. And so ultimately they just didn't really need or want it. And that's the danger of working forwards towards an offer instead of backwards from it. If you want to learn more about this, I just made a full video on the topic, so I'll link to it somewhere on the screen. But for now, let's turn to number 5 and another offer-related mistake that's arguably the most problematic of them all. Number 5, not making enough offers. Over the last 2 years, I've had 3 words etched into my brain when it comes to selling stuff online. Make more offers. I think it's easy to overcomplicate the process of getting leads and making sales sometimes, but the reality is actually quite simple. The more offers you make, the more sales you'll make, and the more impact you'll have. Like, I know people in this space who kind of treat offers made as their primary KPI. Like, instead of tracking or worrying about other metrics, the main thing they worry about is how many offers they make each day. And so if you're not where you want to be yet, I think a valuable question to ask yourself is, how many offers did I make today? And not necessarily to join your program. It might just be to grab your free lead magnet or join your email list or whatever. But if the answer to that question is not many or none, then that's going to be a really good place to start in terms of turning things around. Like, remember, the more offers you make, the more you're going to sell and the more impact you're going to have. Next, I want to talk about another mistake that is becoming increasingly important for all of us to keep in mind. Number 6, focusing on info versus brand. The information economy is dead and AI killed it. Now, that doesn't mean that your knowledge and expertise suddenly has no value. It just means that information has been commoditized. So people can now hop on ChatGPT or Claude and get the answers to anything they want in a matter of seconds. And so these days, sharing information alone isn't enough, meaning it's become more important than ever to lean into personal brand as well. So this is something that Gary Vee, for example, has been talking about for years. But now with AI here, with the fact that information has has been commoditized, I feel like it's almost become essential to lean into personal brand. Like building my own audience, trying to build my personal brand is part of my hedge against AI, because we need something that brings people to us beyond the information in our heads. And for me, personal brand can fill that gap in letting people into your world and showing them who you really are, and in showing them who they can become if they work with you. You create trust and authority that attracts the right people to you, and it creates a more compelling reason for people to pick you over someone else. Now, one aspect of that is having something that sets you apart, which is what I wanted to talk about next with mistake number 7. Having nothing to set you apart. If your business was a castle, AI would be the army that's besieging it. But thankfully, there are a couple of moats separating you from it, and one of them is your ideas and IP. Like, this is one thing that AI can't take from you, and it's one thing that instantly sets you apart from the competition. So think of Simon Sinek's Start With Why, or Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, or Mel Robbins's 5-Second Rule. Those are all examples of big ideas. So in my business, I have things like straight line content and the offer unlock and offer ladders and high agency creators. Those are all my terms and ideas and IP. So when I talk about them in my content and people want to find out more, they can't just turn to ChatGPT or Claude to explain them. They have no choice but to come to me to get those answers. Like, ultimately, this feeds into a bigger question that we all need to be able to answer. Why should our target clients pick us over our competitors or AI? Now, like I was just saying, building your brand is part of that, but your ideas are a big part of your brand, and sometimes they can even become the entire brand. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to put some thought into this. Think about how you get people results, come up with concepts and mechanisms and frameworks, name them, brand them, give them life. It's one of the simplest but most effective ways to set yourself apart and ultimately to stay relevant in a world of AI. When it comes to staying relevant though, and targeting the people you want to help, and making your life just fundamentally easier, is another big mistake that people can make, which takes us into number 8. Not understanding who you serve. This is one of the big mistakes that I've made since starting out in this space. Like, basically, for a long time, I didn't really know who my target client was. And for all sorts of reasons that I'm about to get into, it's something you really need to be super clear and specific about. Because knowing who you serve, knowing who your target client is, basically feeds into and informs everything else. Like, if this was kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for the coaching space, this would be like the basic initial level of it. For example, it's almost impossible to put out good offers and content without knowing this. It would be like trying to pick a costume for a fancy dress party without knowing the theme. You're shooting in the dark, you're guessing, and there's no way to show empathy. And you can't find out more about these people either because you haven't defined who they are in the first place. And in the process, your positioning and messaging just ends up all over the place. Now, thankfully, the opposite is also true. As soon as you have that awareness and understanding, it makes everything simpler and more efficient and more effective, just like having a content framework does, which is what we're going to talk about next. Number 9, not using a content framework. So here's something that doesn't get talked about much in the content space, but I think is really valuable to keep in mind. And it's that the real currency of content creation is energy. And that's why having some sort of content framework is so valuable. And conversely, why not having a content framework can be so problematic, can be such a mistake. Because without one, without a framework, you've got nothing to keep that energy in check and on target. And the result is that it tends to get scattered all over the place, which dilutes its potential impact. So in practice, this might look like never really knowing what to post about, posting on lots of disconnected topics, having huge gaps between posts, relying on inspiration to create content, and most importantly, rarely posting anything that connects to what you sell or demonstrates your expertise or authority. In comparison, a content framework is a bit like the guardrails at a bowling alley. Like, your content can still veer from side to side and bounce around a bit, but you know that it's never going to go right down into the gutter and do nothing. Ultimately, it's always going to be heading in the right direction, heading towards the target, heading towards getting your results. Put simply, a good framework facilitates the outcomes that you want, and it helps you get them in a much more efficient way. Now, the content framework that I came up with is called Straight Line Content, and the tagline for it is that it draws the straightest possible line to result. I made a full video on this a few weeks ago, so I'll link to it somewhere on the screen. But for now, I want to turn to the next mistake and a specific type of content that's particularly useful for generating leads and sales, but that I don't see people posting very often. Number 10, never sharing evidence. In order for me to buy something from you, first of all, I need to trust that you can help me. And that's where posting evidence comes in. It's one of 3 main content pillars that help build an audience of buyers: philosophy, issues, and evidence. Posting them all is what I call sharing your pie, but evidence is arguably the most powerful one when it comes to generating leads and sales. You're demonstrating that you can solve people's problems by demonstrating that you've solved those problems for people in the past. And the best way to do it, from what I've seen, is with a case study, but it's something that I rarely see people posting. I speak to coaches and creators who have helped people get amazing results, who've delivered incredible transformations for people, but then they never share those stories, they never share those transformations in their content. They might post testimonials here and there, but that's not the same as a case study. A testimonial is basically just positive feedback that someone has about your stuff, but a case study provides A, context around those results, and B, the process or system you use to get them. So for example, it's really inspiring to see that David made 20K in the first week of joining your program, and that you can't recommend it enough. But as someone in your audience reading that testimonial or watching that testimonial, I don't know if David already had a really big audience, for example, or if he was working 70 to 80 hours a week to get those results. Whereas if you tell me that David had 400 followers, he's a dad, and he was doing everything around his full-time job, and here I am as a dad working a full-time job who has a small following, now I'm really going to lean in, because suddenly those results are in context and they feel much more relevant to me. Like, I can see myself in David's story, and I know that people like me in my position have benefited from your stuff. And this is a really important point, because like Robert Cialdini wrote in his book called Influence, we will use the actions of others to decide on proper behavior for ourselves, especially when we view those others as similar to ourselves. And so this is why a good case study is so valuable, because compared to a testimonial, it provides that type and level of context, but it also explains how the results came about. Like, if you were creating a case study on David and that 20K that he made in the first week of joining your program, you would detail the main steps that he took to get those results, even if it's just in broad strokes. And so that way, his story, his transformation isn't just compelling and inspiring. I, as someone in your audience, now also know that there's a repeatable system that I can use to get the same outcome. And so if you've helped people generate impressive results of any kind and you aren't doing so already, I really encourage you to post more case studies, tell those stories, because if you don't, you're missing out on a really powerful opportunity to generate more leads and sales and authority. All of which leads nicely onto mistake number 11, not using your assets. You could have tens of thousands of dollars worth of IP sitting on your laptop right now without even realizing it. As a creator or a coach, it's really easy to assume that in order to sell more stuff, you have to make more stuff, when in reality, it's almost always simpler and more efficient to use the stuff that you already have. And a big part of that is treating everything you make, whether it's for yourself or for a client, for what it really is, an asset. When you see everything you make as an asset, you end up with a growing list of stuff that you can package up and sell or use as a lead magnet. For example, a couple of years ago, I bought some cinema LUTs from Tom Noski, and they were LUTs that he'd made and used for himself for his own content. And so he didn't have to make anything new there. He simply packaged something that already existed on his computer and sold it. And every single one of us should be doing exactly the same thing. So for example, let's say that you're a fitness coach and you've just come up with a new fitness program for a client, or maybe you're a content creator and you keep all your content ideas in a Notion template. Whatever the case may be, those are assets. And if you've been in this space for any length of time, there's a really good chance that your laptop's full of them. The sooner you realize that, the sooner you can start making more money from work you've already done. It's worth mentioning that treating everything as an asset isn't the only way to do this though. So if you want some more ways that you can make more money from work you've already done, I'll put a link on the screen to the video I just made on that topic. Next though, let's move on to probably the biggest mistake that I've made over the last 2 years, and something that I know holds a lot of other people back too: overthinking or delaying action. I should be further ahead than I am. And the reason I'm not is because I've spent far too much time thinking about what I should be doing versus just doing. The other day I saw Alex Hormozi say something about how people wait a decade to do the first hour of work to get the outcome that they want. And I can definitely relate to that. It's such a good way to put it. But for me, at least, it's not just that first hour of work that's the issue. It's staying consistent and continuing to do the work that you know you should be doing, but that for whatever reason may feel uncertain or unappealing. The irony is that action is the cure-all. So if you lack motivation, action is what builds it. It's the same when you're struggling with uncertainty. You can't think your way out of uncertainty. You just have to lean into it and take action anyway. And then obviously there's progress too. At a very basic level, you can't get where you want to go unless you take the first steps towards it. And unfortunately, there are almost always more steps and reps that are required to get where you want to go to. So the longer you delay, the more frustrating and hopeless things can feel. Obviously, the antidote to all of this is pretty simple, even if it isn't easy, which is that eventually you have to stop thinking, stop planning. You have to shift from park into drive, accepting the fact that you may not have all the answers that you want, but that you can still take action anyway, trusting that things inevitably will start to feel clearer as you go, and ultimately that things will work out. On the subject of fear, trust, and taking action though, let's dive into mistake number 13, not embracing AI. Whether we like it or not, AI is here, and if I'm honest, I don't. But I've been thinking a lot about it recently because it feels a bit like the doping scandal that hit cycling years ago. Like as soon as Lance Armstrong started taking performance-enhancing drugs, every other cyclist on the tour had to start doing the same thing, because if they didn't, they simply wouldn't have a chance, they wouldn't be able to compete, they'd just start falling behind. I think something similar is going to happen with AI, where if your competition is using it to do things faster than you and better than you almost have no choice but to adopt AI, simply so you can keep up and compete, especially moving forwards in the long term. There's obviously much more to be said on AI, so I'm going to try and make a full video on this in due course, but the basic point is that if you aren't already, then you should probably use, learn, and embrace it. Ignoring all the social and environmental and political and personal issues with AI, there's no doubt that AI can make life easier and it can streamline your operations and help in all sorts of ways in your business. Which leads me to the final mistake and something else that's worth doing that many people don't. Not building your email list. If you don't have an email list, your business is walking on extremely thin ice, because you can have the biggest and most engaged audience in the world, but if you don't own it, then you're one hiccup away from losing everything. If your account gets hacked, if you annoy the algorithm, or even if you just lose or forget your password, it can have really devastating consequences. This is something that I have learned the hard way, and it's why I'm quite passionate about this topic, because it's exactly what happened in my last business. So my content sites made money through ads, and I drove traffic to them through a combination of SEO and a big publishing platform that I had access to. So in other words, my audience and income both relied on platforms that I had no control over. And so when the algorithm update hit, when the shadow ban hit, it was basically a kill switch for my business. I watched an audience of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people disappear almost overnight, and I had no levers to pull to get it back because I hadn't built my email list. The audience wasn't mine, I didn't own it, I was simply renting it from the platforms I was using to drive traffic. And so that for me is the big incentive to start building your email list and start taking people off of social media. But it's definitely not the only reason. Like, email gives you 24/7 direct access to your audience, unlike social media where you have to kind of appease an algorithm. And it's also a much more natural environment for making offers compared to social media. So all told, although I know it can feel like an extra step, if you aren't doing this already, I really encourage you to start focusing on your email list, and again, taking people off of social media into an environment that you own. I've seen and made countless mistakes over the last couple of years, but the ones I've covered here are arguably the most common and most detrimental when it comes to making progress in this space. So I 100% recommend avoiding them if you can, and I hope this video will help you do so. Once again, don't forget to check out the link in the description to the 10-minute offer unlock if you want to see if your offer's doing everything right or if there's any room for improvement. And finally, to see the offer unlock in action, as well as learning more about what it takes to make a good offer, check out this video next, where I run a very well-known offer from a very well-known creator through the tool. Thanks so much for watching this one though. Please like and subscribe if you got any value from it, and I will see you in the next one.